that. Awesome. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and get started because it's 4 o'clock and we want to keep this to an hour or less and maximize our time today. This session is hopefully going to be a helpful session to talk about the topics of resumes, cover letters, and applications.
I think we should go longer. Let's see how long we can keep
No, we're
Enrique
not, we're
up.
not going to keep people
It's
up.
already midnight.
Okay, Jim, you could change the next slide,
Yep, you're
please,
right.
so we can get started. Okay. So just as a brief introduction, if one of us is not your assigned associate, just so you know who we are presenting today, my name is Jennifer Imholt, and I'm a senior associate for Latin America, and joined by my husband Bob. And together we also help advise all the candidates from the US West Coast, mostly candidates coming from Washington, Oregon, California, and Nevada. But I see we have a lot of candidates joining us from all over the world, and we are so happy that you're here today. And we hope that this session will be helpful in answering your questions and helping you with your application process. So just so you know the topics we're going to cover today, we're going to be discussing a little bit about resumes. As you know, resume is part of your search application. We're going to talk about some tips for writing good cover letters when you're applying to schools, and we'll have some general application advice. And of course, we will leave time, especially at the end, for questions that you might have that aren't covered during our little spiel. And also, you're welcome to, as we're going along, if you want to drop a question in the chat, we will get to those for sure, either during the course of our little chat or at the end where we'll have time for that. So feel free to put any questions in the chat as we go. And Bob's going to start talking a little bit about resumes. Go ahead.
Resumes / CV. So let me tell you what I consider to be the difference. And having worked in 6 K-12 schools and helped recruit teachers in each one of those, and also in higher education, where I ran a program for the graduate program for international educators at Buffalo State. Uh, in K-12 education, typically recruiters will look for a resume. Whereas in higher ed, they're looking for the CV. And what the CV does is it shows a college, a university, a higher ed institution, the breadth and length of your experience and what sort of research you've been involved in and what sorts of articles you've published and books and that sort of thing. And when I was in higher ed and I was hiring people there for my program, I would have CVs that ran 150 pages or sometimes more. That's not what we're looking for in K-12 education. What we want is a resume. And so that first bulleted point is length. So what you're doing in this document is you are providing a school with a snapshot summary of your education, experience, and key skills. And when a search school, when a recruiter gets a resume for a given position, they're not just getting your resume. They're getting literally, in some cases, hundreds of resumes for an individual position. And if a school has 10, 20 positions, that means they're going to be reading literally hundreds of resumes. And so when we say length, 1 or 2 pages maximum, the world according to Bob is no more than 1 page. So as I said, I worked in 6 international schools. I was in the military for 13 years. I ran a program at Buffalo State for a couple of years. So I was in higher ed, and I've been a search associate for 8 years now. And my resume with to include education, which I have a PhD in K-12 educational leadership, my resume is a single page. So we get reached out to a lot asking for help on how to bring a resume down from 3 and 4 pages to 1 or 2 pages. I'm always willing to share mine, or for you to share yours and for us to provide feedback. And if
Yeah.
you're not our candidate, rest assured that your associate will provide that same sort of service. But length, 1 to 2 pages. Clear, easy to read font. As you know from your word processing histories, there are a million types of font. Sometimes people have a tendency to go a little too fancy, and it makes it very difficult to read. Again, recruiters are looking at a lot of these, so you want to provide something that's easy for them to read. Succinct. Limit to a full bullet points per experience. So that's the hardest part, I think, for people is they want to describe everything that they did in a given school, and they can spend a half a page just on one experience. What you got to do is you got to figure out a way to show the recruiter what position you were in and some of the key things that you did in your grade three classroom or your middle school science job or whatever.
And
And
I would also say to make sure that whatever bullet points you put under your topic, that there's something that is unique. Don't put three things that are just expected, like assessing students or lesson planning. Those are
yeah.
things that, of course, everybody should be doing and are doing as teachers. If you facilitated an after-school activity or a club, or you were a leader, or you led your PLC, or
Yeah.
you sponsored something special, that kind of bullet point would be something that would be unique that you might want to put under that.
Yep, absolutely. Chronological. Most recent work history at top. So what I see in some resumes is I have to go to page 2 and sometimes page 3 to figure out what your most recent work experience is, was. And that's difficult for a recruiter. They want to see where you are now and what you're doing now so that when your references come in, they can correlate those two things. So always start with most recent work history and you can get to the other stuff later, but recruiters want to see where you are. Personal statement and education near top. So the personal statement we don't require, and that's hard for some folks to try to fit that and all the other things that go on a resume in a single page. And it is absolutely fine to go 2 pages. While my preference is one, it's common practice to go two, and that's fine. But those things again go below your recent experience. Proofread for spelling and grammar.
That should be
I'm sure
obvious,
most of you
but
do this, but you would be surprised at how many times we'll see
spelling errors.
spelling errors, punctuation errors. We'll see something is clearly done by Chat GPT because it's copied and pasted, and you can see it's from Chat GPT on the top because they
Mhm.
haven't edited that out.
Yeah.
So it's your first opportunity to make a first impression, and so it needs to be rock star solid. Make sure you do spelling and grammar, have a friend do spelling and grammar check. You want to make sure that when that posts that it's right.
Mhm.
The picture. In the old days, search would provide a picture on the profile. We actually kind of required it. We have, for the last 5 or 6 years, not required that. In fact, we don't offer it as an option. But if candidate is interested in having a picture that they can provide a recruiter, you can put that in the upper right hand corner or the upper left hand corner of your resume.
Yeah, really personal
It
preference.
is.
We'd say maybe about 50% of candidates still like to have a photo on there and 50% don't. But
Yeah.
as Bob said, due to our DEI initiatives, we removed that as a requirement. But again, a lot of people ask, and it's really up to you if that's something you want to have or not have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next topic I'm going to talk about, we get a lot of questions about cover letters and emails of interest. And if you're already an active candidate on search, you've probably already started applying or looking at openings that are happening, and you're thinking, what do I send to this school? What should I say? Where do I even start with this? And so it's really important to think about the fact that okay, hang on. We're gonna.
We want to make sure we got everybody admitted.
Yeah. Okay.
Jim, is that something you can check?
He can't see it because there's.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. So thank you. If you're just joining us, we have just let you in. We are on. We're just starting to talk now. We got a few other. late joiners. Okay. If you're just joining us, welcome. So, cover letters and emails of interest. When you're applying, again, this is another opportunity to make a positive first impression. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of personalization. And a lot of people are like, what do you mean by that? How do I personalize it? Because I would say a lot of the things that we see coming through the applications are people who have clearly got a base letter, a generic one, and then they're just cutting and pasting and cutting and pasting and cutting and pasting the exact same thing to every school, regardless of the position, regardless of the location or curriculum of the school. They're just sending out the same thing. And, my advice to you is don't do that. Okay. It's good if you have a basic letter that you want to kind of use as your base draft, but it's important to personalize it. So, how does one personalize their application letter to a school, their cover letter? Or if you're applying through search and you see that blue contact school button and you press it and it opens an email field, that email of interest place is really a cover letter in email form. So, the number one thing that you should do if you found a school that has an opening that matches you and you're really excited about it and you want to send off an application, go to that school profile, look at the top of the profile, find out who is the director, who is the head of that school, because you're going to want to weave their name into your salutation to them. Instead of saying, to whom it may concern, or dear sir, or dear ma'am, look and see, is it dear Dr. Habegger or dear Mrs. Smith or whomever it is? Identify them so that you can weave that into dear so and so and hiring team. So they know, first of all, you took the time to figure out who's receiving my application, who's the head of school is probably going to put eyes on this application. And then second of all, before you send that off, you want to find out what is special about this school. Take a few minutes and go from their school profile to the school website and look and find out, what is their mission statement? What are their core values? What is their vision? What's unique about them? Are they the oldest IB school? Do they have a very special service learning program? Are they really into experiential education? What is it that is amazing about them that you think, wow, I'm a good fit because I like that too, or I do that too, or that really resonates with me. It's important to pick out something, really anything. It doesn't matter so much what it is. A lot of times it's the mission statement that people resonate with and compliment them on it. Like, I really love that your school mission of da 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 da, whatever it is, resonates with me. And here's why I would be a good fit for you. If you can catch their attention early by complimenting them on something that's important to them, you have a greater chance of grabbing and capturing their attention and having them think, wow, I want to learn more about this particular candidate. I want to see their full profile. I want to know more about them. So again, your cover letter, your email of interest doesn't have to be long, but it should be personal
Shouldn't be.
and it should be a couple of paragraphs maximum. It should identify something special about them that you want to share, that you feel a connection to, or that really resonates with you. And then share an anecdote or two about something from your own practice that you've done or that is part of your curriculum experience or training that makes you a good fit. Like, why, what are you going to bring to the school that is going to be a good fit for them? So, those are things that you really want to think about when you're writing that letter. And it's okay to have a basic one that has a few key things that you want to include about yourself in every letter. But just remember, take that and you need to adjust it slightly for each school so that it's personalized to that school. So, Jim, you can change it. Okay, so application. So, as we start looking at applying, and some of you who are on our session today are already active candidates, some of you might not be active yet. But when you're an active candidate on search, one thing that happens is you start getting the daily email updates that match your positions that you're seeking. And so, as you start to see those, again, we just talked about this, think about when you see an opening. It shouldn't just be, oh, that's a PE teacher. I want to be a PE teacher. I'm going to apply to that. Or, oh, this whatever opening came up in Germany. I love Germany. I only want to go to Germany. I'm going to apply to it because it's Germany. Really think about, is the actual job description a fit for you? And again, have you looked at the school? Do you have experience with that curriculum? Does that mission and vision that they have resonate with you? And will you be a good fit for them? So, those are things that you want to think about. So, also, one of the things that comes up often, and I think it's really important that you make sure you read the job descriptions carefully. When you go to look at that on the school profile, make sure you read it. Sometimes there's some nuances in there that you might want to take a good look at before you apply, just so you can either rule in or rule out if it's a fit. We have some schools that they might be looking for a um, female head of boarding or a male PE teacher. Look and make sure, does that match you? Or they might say you must have experience with the IB curriculum in order to apply for this. So again, so you don't waste your own time and the recipient on the other end's time if you're not a fit for it, just make sure you check before you apply. Um, Applying in a timely manner, that's something that we get panicked emails from candidates. Oh my gosh, I just missed the deadline and it was due,
But it's
tonight.
not, I still have until midnight tonight, and the job's been open for 10 days. And schools have the right, and sometimes take advantage of this, and they'll post it in the announcement that if they have the candidate pool that they're comfortable with, they can close the position when they have that candidate pool that they're looking for. So
Mhm.
they sometimes close positions early. And if you wait until the last minute because you want to have that perfect application, you might find yourself in a position where they close the posting before you have a chance to submit.
And
So get it done early.
yes, and one other thing I would say you have to be mindful of is that schools are in different time zones. Their deadline midnight might be your morning. So don't wait till the last minute. My point is, if you see something and you're a good fit and you're super excited, send off that application within a day or two of seeing the announcement to get it
Yeah.
into that pipeline, because then you're going to avoid, a sad or stressful moment when you realize that you missed your window of opportunity. So it's a good practice, even though we know teachers are busy. During your week, you are lesson planning, marking, dealing with kiddos. You don't have time every single night to sit down. Maybe you don't have the mental energy every night to sit down and fire off applications. But if once a week on the weekend or whatever, you take your time and you dedicate a little time to go in and make sure you're applying to things that are good fits for you, we would definitely say that's a good practice. Sometimes candidates say, well, I've applied and I haven't heard anything back. You have to realize that some schools have a big HR department. They might have a cast of thousands who are able to answer every single applicant in a timely manner. And some schools might just have that head of school and their secretary who are trying to field dozens of applications, and they don't always get back to every candidate. Some schools will only reply to the candidates that they want to speak to. Some will reply to everyone. I wish I could say that every school would reply to every candidate, but they don't, and most aren't staffed to do so. So if you haven't heard anything in like a week or 10 days, we always say follow up. It's okay to write again and say, I remain very interested in this position, and I just want to reiterate my interest in my application. I hope you've received it. I look forward to hearing from you. At least you are trying to follow up with that if you haven't heard back.
And just as an extension of that, while you're hopeful that when you reach out, you're going to hear back from a school, my number one complaint from candidates is that they haven't heard back from a school. But interestingly enough, my number one complaint from schools is they're reaching out to candidates that they really like and they're not getting a response. So that's a two-way street. you'll reach out if you don't hear back within 10 to 14 days. But if a school reaches out to you, even if you're not interested, do the professional thing and respond. And I'd even go a step further and say, have every conversation. If a school reaches out, even if you think that's a place, a region that you don't want to go to, I think you owe it to yourself to have the conversation. And then if you decide you don't want to go because it's not a good fit, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing about um, applying is that, and we experienced this ourselves when we were applying over the years for different jobs. Sometimes we send out literally hundreds of applications over the course of many months. And you need to realize that sometimes this process is going to be a marathon. For some people it might be a sprint, but for most people it might be a marathon. And again, you're trying to find some a school that's a good fit for you. They're trying to find the best candidate for that position. And sometimes it is all about their bigger picture recruitment puzzle, which you can't see. We don't know in a given year if a school has, 20, 25 openings. What are all the combinations? And they're looking at couples, they're looking at singles, they are looking at, all these different variables that help them make a decision on how they're going to staff. So again, it's good if you can get yourself to the point where you don't take rejection personally. Just realize it's competitive, and sometimes it has to do with the best fit for that particular combination of variables that they're looking for. So
Yeah,
hang in there and stay positive.
there's a million reasons why people get a job or don't get a job. It comes down to timing, goodness of fit, and chemistry that is created during the conversation. And if those three things don't work out for you, it doesn't mean you're a poor educator. It just means that for whatever reason, the school felt like there was a slightly better fit, which brings us to the last point here.
Yeah, just stay positive. You've got to be persistent. You've got to be proactive. And, the other thing we would say is one of the things, especially if you're just starting out in this industry and you really are looking to get your toe in the door and get your first international position and get your start, is to keep an open mind about where you might end up. Because sometimes we get candidates that are very specific, like, well, I only want Europe, or I only want Northern Europe, or I really only want Denmark because that's where my ancestors came from. And you're like, the more narrow the focus, the less likely that you're going to find a match. Keep an open mind. Again, we have 750 schools around the world. You don't know what school might see your profile and think, wow, this person could be a fit for me. So again, when Bob said, have every conversation, keep an open mind about where you might end up going. Because when we started and we were very young and very
Not
inexperienced,
that long ago.
it was a long time ago. Anyway, I had my own misconceptions or different conceptions about what regions
Yeah.
I thought would be maybe not for me as a woman, or I thought they might be scary or whatever. Well, again, we ended up going to all sorts of regions. We were in the Middle East, we were in Asia, we were in Africa, we were in Latin America, and every place was unique and exciting. It had pros and cons to it. So have every conversation.
So I would say two things here. One is looking for jobs is like running a race. And there are sprints that are over really quickly and you get a job and you're like, oh, it didn't take long. I've had people get a job in the day that their profiles went active. That's the
Very
truth.
rare.
It's rare, but it happens. I've had people when we had our 3-year memberships, and we're now 1-year memberships. But I've had people who were selective. They were admittedly selective, and they literally got a job right at the end of their 3-year membership. We were just in the process of renewing their membership, and they got a job at the end. Sometimes these are sprints, sometimes they're marathons. The
Yeah.
only way you don't get a job is if you stop looking, if you stop running. You got to keep going. And the last thing I'd say is be self-actualized. You're great. You're all great educators, or you wouldn't be a search candidate, right? You're all great educators. There's a home out there for you, and you'll find it if you're persistent. You keep running.
Yeah, good advice. So the next we put up a few questions that we commonly are asked, and so we thought we'd address these. And then after this, I know that some of you are putting some questions in the chat, and we will get to those as well after. Okay, so thank you all so much for your patience. Again, one of the things that we get asked a lot is, how am I going to get noticed? How do I make an impression? How do I get my application seen? And some of those things we touched on with that personalization piece. I think one, you have to be proactive and you have to be putting your applications out there. If you just hanging out in the database hoping someone's going to discover your wonderfulness and you don't ever apply to anything, that's also going to be a challenge. You have to be applying to things of interest. And again, personalizing your approach so that you're not just generically, hitting every, position. If you're an elementary teacher and you send out 100 of the exact same letter to every school that has a fourth grade position, that's not going to be the same as personalizing that to each school about why you're a good fit. What do we do if we're half of a teaching couple? How do we apply together? If you're a teaching couple and you should both have active candidate profiles on search and you're connected to each other. So, for example, if Bob and I were applying and I applied for something, someone can see his application at the same time as they see mine. One of the questions we commonly get, though, is should we send one cover letter or should we send two? Or if it's what do we do with that? And that's really personal choice. A lot of candidates will kind of tag team, and one half of the couple will say, okay, I'll write to these schools with our letter that we've formed together, and the other half of the couple will write to the other schools. Some will both write their own individual cover letter to the school with two matching positions and reference each other. Um, if it's one of those blue contact school buttons, that type of application where you send an email, that's really personal choice if you want to send a combined one or an individual one. If the application is on our apply system, some of you might have seen apply and it has the yellow apply now button. If you're part of a couple, you both have to do the apply things separately because that's just how that candidate management system is set up. That if I'm applying for fourth grade and you're applying for, middle school social studies, we both have to do our own apply applications to be seen. That's just how apply works. Um, what should I do if a school asks me to apply through another agency? This doesn't happen very often anymore. We had some challenges with that in the past where some schools had said on their search application, apply through Scrolls or something like that. If that happens, alert us because it shouldn't be happening. However, some schools do have their own sort of application system. This last week, I got several questions about the UWC SEA Dover, it's a UWC campus that's in Singapore. They have their own homegrown application for UWC schools, United World School College schools, and they do make you jump that extra hoop to be considered. If you ever encounter like directions on an application and you're really not sure what to do, by all means reach out to your associate because sometimes it can be tricky and we will always answer that.
And you always need to either apply through apply or the blue contact school button because when you do that, the school gets a live link back to your entire search profile. Whereas if you apply through their platform, some candidates think, okay, I see that they have a website and they have an HR link on their website where I can apply directly. That's got to be better. Well, when you apply that way, you become just like every other candidate who doesn't have a search vetted profile, and you're just like everybody else who doesn't have a search profile. And having a search profile means you're vetted, means your resume is available, your references are available, and it gives you a leg up on those other candidates. So always use apply the apply button, the blue one, or yeah, the
Yellow apply
yellow
or the
apply
blue
and the
context.
blue contact school.
Right. And so if you do, though, hit one of those exceptional ones like United Road College that asks you to apply a certain way, you can still follow up as well through your contact school and say, I've applied as you directed. You can do that as well. But
And
most
that gets them the link back to your profile.
Absolutely. Um, so, a little bit about what are the benefits of attending an in-person fair versus applying on the database. We also get asked this. Um, of course, if you live in proximity to a fair, or if it's within your budget and your schedule that you can attend a fair, by all means, it is wonderful to get yourself in person in front of recruiters if you can. Okay, that's a whole other experience, and we're going to have a different session all about fairs and attending them if you want to. If you can be in person, obviously it gives you an advantage of being in front of a person. However, applying through the database is great as well, and we realize that the vast majority of our candidates spread around the world, they're not all living near a fair, and they may not be able to get time off of work for a fair or afford an airline ticket to travel a long way to go to a fair, and that is okay. The majority of our candidates that are placed every year, nowadays, I think it's probably between 60 and 70% of our candidates can find a job just by applying through the database. That doesn't mean you shouldn't attend a fair if you can. However, that's not the only way to get a job. Whereas back in the day, back in the early 90s when we started, if you didn't, there was A, there was no internet, but B, you had a job fair. You went to it. If you didn't get a job, well, you went back to the fair the next year. Life has changed. Technology has changed that. And our platform and the ability for people to interview over Zoom and Google Meets and WhatsApp and any kind of video calls, that has really changed the way that people interview these days. So again, apply through the database. Even if you plan to attend a fair, even if you have signed up for a fair in January and you're going to go, don't wait until the fair to start applying for
Yeah.
things of interest.
Yep.
If you see something next week that you're interested in, by all means, start applying. You might get a job before the fair. If not, the fair can be a lovely piece of your recruitment process. Um, and then the last question that we often get to is what are steps to take if I'm offered a contract or when I'm offered a contract by a school? Because then it's very exciting, like, oh my gosh, I have an offer. What do I do with this information now? And that's when we get a lot of emails from our candidates saying, can you take a look at my offer letter or contract? What should I be asking that I'm not asking? Or what should I do now? And so we do have a few pieces of advice that we always say. And one is, first of all, do not say yes unless you mean yes. Even verbal agreements are considered binding. So if you're not, when a school offers you something, the first question should be, thank you so much. I'm super excited to review this offer. By when would you like the decision? Because if you're at an actual fair, it might be within 48 hours. If you've applied through the database, it might be a week until they want their answer. But how long do I have? Because in that time, you want to ask all the questions that you need to clarify about the offer. You may want to ask, and it's a really good idea, regardless of what position or where, is ask to be connected with teachers who work at the school now. Ask to be connected to someone on the department you're going to work with. Ask to be connected if you're traveling with children with another family, another expat family that has kiddos at the school. Ask to be connected with other members of the team so you can ask about life at the school, life in the community, social activities, kind of things you can or can't find at the grocery store, whatever is important to you, like what kind of extracurricular clubs exist for students there if you've got kiddos that are traveling with you. Ask all of those questions that are going to help you do your due diligence and make a really good decision about whether or not you're going to accept this offer. So if you aren't sure at any time, that's the point before when you're in this thinking period to reach out to your associate and ask them questions or ask them to take a peek at an offer and give you feedback or anything like that. That is That's what we're here for on the sidelines. And that's my advice. Can you think of anything else you'd ask them?
Just let me reinforce her original point. If you say yes, you are no longer available to continue looking. As
Hmm.
soon as you say yes, you need to reach out to your associate and tell your associate that you verbally or in writing or signed a contract, and your associate will take you off the market. And we've had cases where folks have taken a job and not told us and kept looking, and then actually took a job in a second school
Big
search
no,
school,
no.
and then actually took a job in a third search school. And
Mm,
when the schools found out, they of course told us, and the candidate no longer can work with search, and all three offers were retracted.
yeah,
What you're doing is
yeah,
you're wrecking your career, at least through search.
yeah,
So once you say yes, you're off the market, and you
yeah.
should notify your associate immediately.
That's why it's very important to do your due diligence and to ask questions before you accept something. And if something's not a good fit, it is absolutely okay to very graciously thank them and say, thank you so much for this kind
Yeah,
offer. However, it's not the best fit for me personally or professionally at this time, or it's not the best fit for my family at this time. I wish you all the best in
yeah,
finding the right candidate. It's absolutely appropriate and professional to handle it that way. You may have offers come to you that, are interesting, but you just know there's something telling you that that's not the right fit for you right now, and that's okay. But that's why it's so important to do your due diligence and really ask all those pertinent questions about the contract, the benefits, the, lifestyle that you'd be saying yes to there before you say yes, before you get to yes.
yeah.
Okay. Let me look at the questions that are now um, in the chat. So forgive me if I'm just trying to bumble around here a little bit. One of the questions is, will you share your CV on this talk? Unfortunately, I don't have Bob's one-page CV here
You just
in the chat.
send me an email,
Or
and
if you
I
put, Natalie, if you put your email in the chat, whether you're our candidate or someone else's, we can email you an exemplar of that if you'd like to see it. Okay. We'd be happy to do that. That was Natalie's question. Um, hopefully,
Mar,
hopefully,
did your friend get into the in?
Mario, did your friend get into the room? I hope so. I
Yeah, we
hope
see
they,
everybody
okay,
admitted.
I
So
think everyone got admitted.
okay.
Yeah, apologies if somebody didn't get in on initially. We were trying to monitor that. From your experience, do recruiters prefer to see a picture on CV? I don't know that they prefer to. I think people are pretty neutral about that. I'd say if you do put one on, put a professional one. We had a actually, do you want to say something about that,
No,
Mark?
I was just going to say if you're going to go to a fair, it's nice to have the picture on the resume, because I would print off all the resumes of the folks I wanted to talk to, and then I can match a name to a face.
Yeah, when
But
you're in person.
honestly, it really comes down to personal preference. It's not going to be the thing that does or doesn't get you a job.
Right, right, absolutely. I think it's, again, it's subjective for most of us, we just want to see, um, somehow, hold on a second. Yeah. I Okay, I'm trying to get back to the main chat really quickly because now I've got everyone chat. Okay. So again, like we said, it's subjective. If you're at an in-person fair, then yes, it could be helpful. But again, it is totally a personal call on that. What can a teacher do with
Yeah.
no IB experience? Do they have a chance of getting into IB school? Great question.
Yes.
And, when we started, we didn't have IB experience. And it turned out that one of our schools that we worked at decided that it was going to go the way of the IB, and in the process, it trained up all the teachers. There's the IB, if it's a very old, very well-established IB school, for example, a lot of the European IB schools that have been around forever, they're going to be perhaps a little more particular about wanting people to have that training experience, etc. However, there are many new IB schools coming on in the Middle East, in Asia, in many parts of the world, and they realize that they're going to have to grow their teachers' professional development as they go on board with it. So if teachers have the right mindset of
Yeah.
inquiry-based learning, that can be very helpful. There are helpful resources as well on the IB website. If you go to the IB website, sometimes they have like free on, little videos on there. There's also um, category one workshops are kind of introductory, no matter what level of IB or what subject area. Category one is kind of introductory to kind of the ethos of the IB and the framework of the IB and whatnot. So you can do some things to educate yourself online if you want to. And again, having an inquiry-based background and being able to, especially if you're an elementary teacher, it is not hard to become versed in PYP if you're like an elementary teacher and you've already done inquiry-based. But
Yeah, I think it's important to, if you don't have that experience and you're interested in breaking into those schools, as Jen mentioned, two of the six schools we worked in emerged as IB schools, were authorized as IB schools while we were there. We helped take them through that process. Um, and and as a recruiter, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get the experienced IB teachers. They were going to want to go to the higher profile IB schools. So sometimes I was lucky and I got a trained IB teacher to come in and say yes. Most of the time, I was looking for somebody who was open to that approach to learning. I can train up a great teacher on pretty much anything. So if you educate yourself on the lingo and the philosophy, and you're having a conversation with an emerging IB school, that's your way to break into the IB network of schools, and then eventually you can work your way up to those established flagship schools like Copenhagen International, for example.
right. And sometimes in the application, it'll say IB background preferred, but it doesn't say required. Apply to it. Unless they're like, it's required and you have to have 2 years or more of this and training and this and that, go ahead and apply. Like I say, you have
I'd
nothing to lose.
apply even if a school says IB experience required. All I can say is no, and you can't
Yeah.
win if you don't buy a ticket.
Is it fine if we follow up 2 weeks after an interview? If I had an interview with a school, I would probably follow up within like a
A
week
week.
if I had questions or if I had an
Yeah.
offer pending, or if I was waiting to hear, I had an interview, but I knew they were interviewing other people and I didn't hear back. I would probably write and just say, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I'm just writing to follow up about your timeline by which you hope to have a decision made on this position. I look forward to hearing from you. Stay on the radar screen with like a gracious
Yeah.
follow up. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Does it look desperate to reach out or does it potentially help? Reach out in what way? For to ask your associate for help? No, I mean, that's what we're here for. And it
Are
doesn't
you
look,
talking about reaching out to schools? That my answer to that, it depends. So I think if you don't reach back out to say, listen, I've remained interested in the position, I'm just looking for an update every week, that's okay until they take the position off. I've had candidates who have reached out literally daily and found various recruiters and school leaders through the website and reached out to those separate from the HR people or the folks they were interviewing with. And that looks desperate.
yeah.
When
If you
yes,
bombard somebody, that's
you
too
want
much.
that job, you sometimes you just have to be patient. So
Yeah,
there's a
patient yet persistent, but
yep,
there's a timeline for that.
yep,
You don't want to overwhelm a school with that, but there is the appropriate follow-up and so no, that doesn't look desperate to continue to check in every 7 to 10 days if you
yep.
haven't heard something, but there's a difference between that and over the top. Can we share the resume? Nerdine, can you also put your email in the chat if you'd like us to send you an example of the resume? That's fine.
I've added my email to the chat.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so much.
Thank you.
When checking a CV cover letter, what qualities do international schools look for beyond teaching experience? One thing I would say that is kind of maybe a more like in subjective thing, but when you go to an international school, they're looking for you to obviously be a great teacher. That's why they're hiring you, number one. But one thing that's a little different about international schools than, let's say, schools stateside or maybe in your home country, depending on where you're coming from, is that your international school very often is the center of the community. It's the heart of the community. It's the heart of all of the activities that revolve in that community for families. So they want to know, are you open to, or will you coach a sport? Will you host a after school activity or club? It's sometimes what do you give and do in the school community beyond the school day? Because I know in all of the schools we worked in, whether it was, facilitating student council or coaching basketball or running a service learning club or um, being chaperones for dances or extra like kind of special trips like Class Without Walls, they really want people who are going to be active in their
Yeah.
community. So I think, obviously they want to see the basic things. What's your education, your credential, your experience? But they also want to know, what do you have to offer above and beyond that? Like, what kind of things about you do you bring to that community?
Yeah.
And again, those are things you can also weave in when you're applying to that goodness of fit. If you love Class Without Walls and service learning and experiential education, then my goodness, if that school has a program like that, then you need to upsell your qualities. So, absolutely. Okay. And I'm going to go back to my everyone chat and let's see here because it's bouncing back and forth. You mentioned we should direct salutations and an inquiry to a person, but it's always a head of school or sometimes a principal. What's the best way? We don't know who was on the other end of the receiving for the applications. When a search school puts up their profile and they list their head of school, we want to assume that that admin team is going to be receiving it. So whether you put that head of school plus hiring committee and hiring team, unless you also if you already know the school or if it's woven into their job description that they want you to not only address the school, but maybe particularly the director of middle school or high school, you can weave their name in, but
Yeah,
assume.
most of the time there's a name there. When in those cases where there is not, I think what I would try to avoid is to whom it may concern, or dear sir or madam. If you could even personalize to the effect of dear hiring team at the American School of Dubai, because then they know that you're directing that email to that school as opposed to copying and pasting the same thing to every school. So it's a little more personal if even if they don't have a name.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking, a lot of folks would love to see a sample CV. So I think when we're done here, we will definitely have to collate all the friends that have asked for that. Okay, let me take a look. I'm an early years teacher in the UK, not trained in inquiry based such as Reggio Emilia or PYP. However, I've hired a Reggio consultant. My school accepted to train me to implement the philosophy in the classroom. Would that effort count? I definitely think any unique training that you have that is
Yeah.
inquiry based. I've personally worked at a school that was Reggio, and that, I mean, while it's not exactly the same as PYP, there are a lot of things about that exploration and discovery and creation that are applicable. And I think you could draw those parallels if you were trying to make a case for that. Some people have a strong Montessori background or they've got a strong Reggio background but haven't done PYP. I think there are attributes and parallels between them that you can make those connections as a way to say, I have done this, and
And I'm drawn to that kind
I'm
of
very
philosophy.
open
Yeah.
and I'm drawn to, that kind of hands-on, inquiry-based,
Yeah.
creative learning that you can weave that into. So absolutely. And there are schools on Search that are Reggio, and there are ones that are Montessori, and there are ones that are PYP, and there are ones that are, don't have any of those special things. But, again, having that, that's just an added like feather in your cap if you have it. And I would put that special training on your resume as well. When our profile is finally active, will you give us feedback on our resumes? I like an example. Okay, yes, of course, we'll share an example. And once your profile is active, or, depending on who your associate is, a lot of times if someone is just a partial, they've only put their name into the system and they want feedback on their resume. No, we don't do that. We want you to be in that waiting to pending stage where you're starting to gather your references and your profiles coming together and you're going to be a viable candidate. If we saw when we review your application that you had a 10-page resume or you had, all kinds of wacky stuff on your resume that wasn't education, every once in a while I get ones that people list every job they had from the time they were in college. Like, I worked at the Olive Garden as a server. That's wonderful, but that doesn't belong on your resume for teaching. So again, we will give feedback if we see something that should or shouldn't be there, or if we have a suggestion like you need to condense it. Of course, we do that. We don't go out of our way, and I mean, if we saw that, we would definitely tell you, but you can also ask for our feedback.
I think resumes are important because it's a snapshot of, again, of your education, training, and special skills. But I think people get too wrapped around the axles about a resume is going to get me a job or not get me a job. You're going to get yourself a job. All you have to do is just make sure your resume is simple enough to be reviewable in a short period of
Yeah.
time, and you're trying to create that first conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions I'm seeing through here is there a way to know when an opportunity has been filled? Yes, search will, the school themselves is the one that puts up or takes down the openings. So whoever for that school, their HR, their admin team, and it'll usually see in your daily emails that it's been removed. Or if you go to that school profile and you see that opening is there and it'll say past the application date and there'll be a red box and no longer a blue contact school, you'll know that it's closed. Um, and how many descriptive bullets would you recommend under each job? Jonathan's asking that. I'd say the rule of three. Don't put more than three bullet points under any job that you have on your resume. You don't need that. That's overkill. A few things that, like I said, that would be unique or special, not obvious things that everybody does, like assessment or classroom management or, planning. Everybody should be doing those things. Do you put bullet point things that make you stand out for you, that are unique? Um, as an English teacher, I know the power of the first line of resume. What would you recommend as your first line? Should we introduce ourselves and qualifications since it's apparent in our CVs? Should we forgo that? In your cover letter, the first thing I would do in my cover letter once I say dear so and so and hiring team is make sure you include what position you're applying for. We see all the time people start telling stuff about, what they've done. I'm very excited to apply for the grade 4 teacher at American School of Doha or whatever it is. Like, put something enthusiastic or it's with great enthusiasm that I'm applying for the blank position at blank school. That's how I would lead. And
Tell them why you're applying, what about the school excites you, and why you're a good fit, some
mhm,
examples of things you've done in your
yeah,
practice that match what's important to them, and then kind of weave in.
yeah,
And because of that, I'm going to be able to hit the
right.
ground running.
And those are after the first line. Her question was, what's your first line?
Yeah, I think it's what you're applying for. You're excited to apply for the job and what
Mhm.
it is you're applying for.
Right. And a couple of other things in here. If Fatima asked the difference between a CV and resume. If you joined us after the first few minutes, Bob did cover that. A CV is usually from higher education. It tends to be very long and contains people's research and published articles, whereas a resume, at least in our definition, is more likely what you're going to see in K through 12 education, which is a couple of page document, maximum 1 to 2 pages with your education, your credentials, your experience, and that sort of
Your
thing.
experience, your education, and your
Yes,
special skills. Yeah.
exactly. Let me go down to here. Okay, well, thank you. Did I miss a question that was obvious? I'm scrolling, so forgive me if I am jumping around here. We have a lot of requests for the resume, and that's great. If you had any other questions, if anyone else would like to share a question or unmute themselves and ask one, we have about 6 minutes, and we are going to stick to time if we can. And so let me just see. Thinking,
Position being
okay.
filled by another candidate.
Will you learn if it's been filled by another candidate? That depends on the school. So some schools will tell every applicant, thank you, but it's now been filled. Other times they might not. You might not hear something. Again, I wish every school could communicate every step of the process and let you know. If it's something through the apply platform, which some of you may have encountered that yellow apply button, the way that candidate management system for applications is set up, the schools can have an automated response that tells you when that position's closed or it's been filled. Whereas through the other means, the contact school button, um, it's up to the school to respond and tell you. And like I mentioned, not all of them will do that. Should I include my educational philosophy in a cover letter? Up to you. If you were a leader, like a principal, an AP, if you're applying for a leadership position, yes, I'd say it's nice to have a little blurb about your educational philosophy. However, as Bob said, sometimes those can get lengthy. And if you don't have space on your resume, if you go to your documents tab on your profile, you can upload your own like one page
Yep.
philosophy of
Yeah.
education as a support
And
document.
frankly, that's where I think
Yeah.
it should go.
Yeah, so you're welcome to do that. It's optional. You don't have to have that. Okay, I'm interested in attending the Bangkok Fair in January. Intent must be submitted by October. Any advice? Well, if you have, it's kind of like jumping without a safety net. We've all done this. It's nice to want to go to a fair, but you only, if your intent to return is by October, then you can fish from now until October and then have to tell your school if you're coming back. Unless you're all in, you're letting go of that and you are throwing caution to the wind and you're going to start applying, then of course you can go to the fair. But
Alyssa, what do you do?
you can just, yeah, I don't see Nick's answering. You can request right.
Third grade teacher.
Third grade teacher.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
a lot of elementary openings get hired later in the season too. So, it might be tough to know if you're going to come back or not. But again, apply for everything you can between now and when you have to tell your school, and then at that time, make the best decision you can for yourself. First, everybody's got different variables in their life about why they're going to stay or why they are, just ready to move on regardless and want to go to a fair. So, that's up to you. Brief rundown on the hiring
I was
season.
asking about, go scroll up. Can you
No,
request?
that's Nick's thing.
Okay.
You can that
Okay.
Nick's on here with the fair. So hi, Nick. And can you give us a brief rundown on the hiring season? It's too early, too late. Okay. We are very early. If you envision the hiring season as a bell curve, we're on just very lightly creeping up that upward slope. We are early right now. Things will start heating up mid-October when people have to tell their schools if they intend to return. And from about November to the end of February is like the height of all activity. That's when the most activity is going to happen. That's when the most things will start posting on vacancies, when the most hiring begins to happen. Some schools start hiring before fairs, some schools wait to go to fairs, and yet hiring will continue all the way through June again. So, unless it's the end of May or June, it's not the end of the world for you. At that times things start slowing down, but even we have people that took jobs in the summer. So it
Yeah.
really varies,
Yeah.
and we can't predict from year to year how many openings are going to happen.
Did you say Nick Kendall's on
I
this?
think he is Nick's iPhone.
Nick
He's in-
Kendall, are you on this?
he says probably doesn't want to. We may have some other associates that are on here, but they don't have to pop on if they don't want to. He may have been on, but you can apply. Obviously, if you have questions about the fair or whether a fair is right for you, ask your associate or request an invitation from your associate, but you can't request an invitation until you're an active candidate. Just know that, okay? Um, are there any other
Do you
questions
know
popping on here?
schools historically
Prefer to go to
fair?
fairs. Boy, the schools that go to fairs, they vary every year. I mean, there are certain fairs that tend to have more schools from a particular region if you're going to, but we don't know.
And
Schools
you
decide.
can ask your associate for a list of the fairs that are signed up for all of our fairs.
You can actually see it
Yeah.
on the fair,
Yeah.
on our search website.
Yeah.
Right now it's early. Okay, just know it's early, and schools don't know yet if they're going to fairs. They're just starting to sign up. So once a fair has kind of a critical mass of schools signed up, they make the attending schools visible on that fair section of our website. And pretty soon you'll see attending schools.
Yeah.
Right now, some of them might have
Story.
yeah, some fairs might say schools that have attended historically, and they might have a list
Yeah.
of some schools, but we don't know because schools don't know yet how many openings and what openings they have. So schools will also be registering for the fairs in the coming months, so it's still early. How much do schools care about the reputation prestige of where you're currently working? How much background research do they do? Well, here's the thing. A lot of people come from public schools in their own home country, and international schools aren't going to know much about those at all. And yet, some people coming from countries are coming from big international schools in their countries. So I think they care less about that than they care about
You-
well, how do you present yourself? What's the quality of your
and what do
experience?
your
What do
references
your references say
say
about
about you?
you? You
Yeah.
know,
If
how do you
you're
interview?
if you're part of the solution and not part of the problem, that's going to show up in your profile and your
Yeah,
outreach. And
yeah,
yeah, they care less about the quality
yeah,
of the school. There are 13,000 kind of quasi international schools scattered around the world. There's no way a school can know all of those.
right. And so I mean, until you've kind of gotten your foot in the door of this circuit and you've been at an international school or two, then other international schools have more of a perception of like the size of the school or the curriculum of the school. But again, schools' prestige and reputations also change over time.
Yeah.
Schools grow, schools shrink, schools are in locations that have
Yeah.
had, difficulties. So, yeah. And we are just about on time here. So, I think what we'll do is we are going, oh, you're very welcome. I thank you for all the kind comments in here. I hope that you found some little useful nuggets out of this.
I'm
And
just curious, which presenter did you like better, myself or
stop.
my wife? I'm just wondered, just asking.
Yeah, you don't have to give a vote on that one. Anyway, we really appreciate you all being here. We thank you for taking the time to learn more. We're excited for you and your journey, and we wish you
Equal. Good
all.
answer. You
Thank
want to
you.
interview?
There's a diplomat in there. Thank you
Because
so
usually they say her.
Anyway, we're very happy that you participated today, and those of you that have asked for um,
Thank
a
you.
sample resume, we'll be happy
Yeah,
to
we'll
email
we'll
that
share a
out just
couple.
so you get
Jim,
an exemplar. We'll take care of that
yeah,
after.
we'll
Okay.
take care of that. We'll
Yeah.
we'll try to get you a couple of
Yeah.
examples.
So I'll have to pull all of those out of the chat so I can get all of your emails of those of you who said that you wanted to
Thanks to
receive that. But
everyone.
thank you all. We're going to end recording and we wish you all the best evening and whatever time of day you're
All the
in.
best, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.